Namaste and welcome to Pause by PEI, a policy discussion series brought to you by Policy Entrepreneurs Inc. My name is Kushi Hang. In today's episode, we have former PEI colleague Tsedon Kansakar's conversation with Sunil Babu Pant on the Roadbumps to marriage equality in Nepal. Tsedon and Sunil discuss the history and status of marriage equality in Nepal. The two draw upon Sunil's first-hand experiences to recall the landmark 2008 case Sunil Babu Pant and others versus Government of Nepal, which pleaded for equal rights to marriage, among other things. They then explored the significance of marriage equality, not only in the terms of human rights, but also society and the economy. Sunil Babu Pant is the founder of the Blue Diamond Society, an LGBTQ rights organization in Nepal. Pant is also the first openly gay national-level legislator in Asia. As a member of the parliament, his legislative goals included equal justice, civil, and economic rights for the queer community. He led the landmark Supreme Court case that decriminalized homosexuality and added a different category of third gender in the Nepali citizenship. He now continues to push forward those agendas as an activist. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Namaste, this is Tsedon.
Namaste, this is Sunil.
Welcome to the show, Sunil. Such a pleasure to have you on Pods.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this program.
Of course. So let's get on with the conversation, shall we? So the case Sunil Babu Pant versus the government of Nepal was a landmark case for Nepal. Revolutionary not just for Nepal, but the world as a whole. Back in 2007, even America, a country heralded for individual liberties, had yet to legalize gay marriage. Now, for the listeners who don't know, could you explain this case and shed some light on why it's revered as such an important case in Nepal's history?
Thank you. It's a landmark case because it was first in the history of Nepal. Such a case has been brought to the Supreme Court of Nepal by sexual and gender minority communities, demanding all the discriminatory laws to be scrapped or amended, but also demanding to end all kinds of violence, especially state-sponsored violence. There used to be a lot of police and security brutality against this community then, but also defying binary gender. So Nepal became the first country when this verdict came from the Supreme Court back in 2007 that recognized more than two genders. So it was really remarkable, but also shed a lot of inspiration to all South Asian and to the rest of the world.
What interests me, and I'm sure it's the same for our listeners, is why do we see this significant traction in 2007? What were the conditions, enablers, or even triggers that mobilized groups and institutions like you to pursue the agenda of the LGBTQ community?
Perhaps it's timing, perhaps is, the movement was moving along and reached to a milestone where we were capable of challenging the government. Because when Blue Diamond Society was first registered in 2001, it was a very difficult time Nepal going through. Maoist insurgency was going on. There were a lot of security presence in the street, a lot of LGBTIQ people, especially the third gender or the transgender people, were in Tarai, I think, because they survive in begging during the wedding and childbirth. So they had to travel village to village. And they would come at a crossroad where other side is controlled by Maoist and this side is controlled by the army. So they used to be raped by both sides. So that kind of atrocities were going on. Then Royal Massacre happened the same year. Then after a couple of years, when the king then, Bikram Shah, took control of took all direct power, dissolved the parliament and imposed state of emergency. That's where security forces were roaming across major cities with impunity. So it was worse for a community like us who were very marginalized. Back then, we survived and worked hard, started documenting human rights violations, even though there was no justice we could access to. And then 2006, there was a populist movement were taking place against the monarchy's direct rule, and the parties and people were demanding to restore the democracy. So we also took ourselves to the streets and then joined that democratic protest to reinstate democracy. That's where we found a bit of alliances. The NGO, the big NGOs then become friends. The political parties were inviting us because there were very few people actually in the beginning joining to the streets. So they started giving us a space. So building alliances started by joining this populist movement. And then the peace accord happened between the Maoist and the government. Then there was interim government was set up. Then they were also calling for interim constitution for suggestions to be included. And then we did submit our demand, but I realized after a couple of months that the suggestion we submitted, filed them, was discarded into the dustbin, not even tabled properly. So that was very disappointing. And I would seek to the same leaders who were calling us, and then telling us they would support after the democracy reinstated, were refusing to have a meeting with me. So 2007, I saw Supreme Court was doing all the fantastic thing that time, even defying the orders from the king, and other, kind of autocratic decisions were taken down by the court. So the image was very positive about the court. So we decided maybe it's the time to take the government to the court. We can understand the autocratic king not listening to us and then mobilizing, but the democratic forces who promises so much, liberty, freedom, and all for marginalized and everyone, gender, sexuality, everything, but they were refusing to meet even. So that's the trigger point. Then I quickly called a lawyer, drafted the writ petition. I didn't have legal language as much. I still, do not know a lot about legal and litigation procedures. But said, look, this is what we want. We want end of this violence, especially from the police. But also there are so many laws against us. We want that change. We want equality. We also want protection from discrimination. And if possible, also marriage. So it was quite a big, ambitious writ petition we filed. The hearing started immediately, and after fourth hearing, the court gave fantastic decision. I think the first statement was sexual and gender minority communities are natural, because there were some, people were talking about unnaturality of being, sexual minority or gender minority. So that was the statement. Then the three executive ordered the court issued it for the government to implement. First one, to recognize their genders and issue the citizenship ID and passport according to their gender identity. That was landmark, first in the world, in a modern world, to recognize that. The second was to scrap and amend all discriminatory laws and policies. And the third one was set up a committee to do a study on the Nepalese society, what impact it would bring if we are allowed to have a same-sex relationship registered. So they took 6 years, but they submitted a report in 2015. The committee also started pretty late. The government took long, I think 4 years to just form the committee. So it took quite a while, but they did a good job, and then they recommended the government to do a full, marriage. So that's where we are now. The citizenship ID is started giving from 2011, men, women, and other. So there's the 3 gender categories.
So just to be clear, although the protection of the queer community was granted by the court, the verdict on gay marriage hadn't been made yet. But what was done was a committee was dispatched to study the repercussions, burdens, and benefits of legalizing same-sex marriage. So, Sunil, can you share with us how a study of this sort is conducted, or more precisely, how this committee did it, and what were the findings and recommendations to the court?
The committees, the structure was already defined into the verdict. So it would be headed by the Secretary of the Health Ministry, and then there would be an anthropologist, someone from the Home Ministry, someone from social sector, and then also a lawyer on behalf of LGBTI community who also pleaded that case. So based on that structure, the committee was formed, and they did survey with questionnaire, interviewing, then visiting different sectors like scholars, religious leaders, the community members, the families, professors, various sectors of politicians, journalists. They talk various sectors of the societies. They also had a foreign country visit to see, they visited Norway, I think, where same-sex marriage was legalized already. And then so they went, talked to the politician there and the impact. They also visited a family, a lesbian couple who were raising 2 children and found it very normal. The children were growing very healthy. Yeah, and then they studied all other countries who have already done either full marriage or civil union kind of thing.
So that sounds quite thorough. So
Yeah.
what were the outcomes of that study, and what were the recommendations to the court?
They recommended the government that to allow full marriage because LGBTI people are not less and then should be considered, on a same ranking like the heterosexual couples. So they recommended for full marriage and all the entitlements that the heterosexual married couple would have.
So after all was said and done in 2007, one would expect the following years to be optimistic for the LGBTQ community. Nepal is often even hailed as a beacon for LGBTQ rights in global spaces. But as we know, the following years were starkly regressive. Today, in 2023, marriage is only legally recognized as the coming together of a man and a woman. And not only did this make a previously gender-neutral provision more narrow, but it also went against our constitution, which strictly states that no one can be discriminated against on the basis of their sexual orientation by the state or by any laws. So can you talk briefly about this and share other events that significantly harm the LGBTQ well-being in Nepal?
I think the global attention and the hype really came because of the Supreme Court decision in 2007, but also the following year, I got elected as a member of parliament, only one in Asia, then the first in Asia as an openly gay member of parliament. But then Nepal went in a mood of complete structural change, so we decided to write a new constitution. So there's not much attention to paid on any laws or anything. So we needed to have this guiding principle for the countries forward is the new constitution. Mm-hmm. So we worked, we drafted, and then the constitution is relatively nice, promising. Unfortunately, the first Constituent Assembly was dissolved before it could promulgate the constitution itself. But then second Constituent Assembly election took place and then they adopted the draft from the first. So the first draft was extremely well written. On the second draft, because no one from the community was represented, I wasn't there, I had to move to UK, and then the party didn't then encourage anyone or took anyone from the community. So they took it down quite a lot. So still in 4 or 5 articles, there are mentioned in a affirmative way, in a positive way, that guarantees equality and non-discrimination on the ground of sexual orientation and gender identities. Mm-hmm. So that's a good sign. And then, of course, it's only 10 constitution in the world that does by the constitution. Mm-hmm. So a lot of European countries who enjoys in other way, but do not have constitutional guarantee. So Nepal is a handful of countries in that sense. So in a way, it's very true. Yeah, it's a beacon of hope for LGBTI have become, particularly in South Asia, also in Asia. Because of Nepal's progress, India got huge pressure and they struck down the Sotheby law. They inherited it from the British colony. And many other countries have done now. The court case is still referred in many other verdicts, judgment across the world. But what happened after 2015, from second Constituent Assembly, already the policymakers were, because there was no one around. And then it's very important to have included into the table of policymaking. So we really missed it. And then, there's a huge gap. So I'm trying to encourage people to join the politics now for a longer term solution. So after the constitution, we needed to change the old Molukian, the country code, making it more modern, but also in line with the new constitution. So they decided to also split it up to civil code separate and the criminal code, and then procedural ones. So they worked on it, were very regressive. And then I was grinding my teeth while being in the UK, not able to do much, but only able to do online or something. But, you can't really do much online with the policy thing. So they did say, fool some of the community activists there, when they go and point out the draft provision problematic. They say, no, it's only for the rest of the others. We'll do a very special good one for you. And I said, do not listen to them. That's a total lie. A national law is supposed to include everyone. If they're saying this kind of thing, then they're cheating already. Do not believe it. That's what I was telling. But, it already happened, it already passed, approved. But there's a struggle now, once it's done. So, undoing is much harder. Mm-hmm. So we have to take it all to the either litigation process or trying to convince a parliament when no one of yours is represented there. It's a humongous task.
So going back to the topic of same-sex marriage, to really illustrate the pains of the individuals, I want to know, Sunil, what are we depriving the community of when we deprive them of marriage and other rights and legal recognitions?
See, the relationship that we want to be recognized is not just emotional bondings. There are a lot of other things comes around it. For example, a couple wants to operate a joint bank account. They're living together, they love each other, there's a complete trust. But because the marriage is not recognized, so the same-sex couple cannot have a joint bank account. And if one of the partner gets sick and has somebody else has to take a decision on behalf, for example, in a coma or something, or emergency, the person who loves cannot take any decision because there's no relationship recognized. Mm-hmm. So they had to call back to those family perhaps who have disowned them already. So it doesn't make feel good. You don't feel safe. So you're concerned about that either for yourself or to your partner. What would happen if an emergency thing? But also if there's a great anxiety about what would happen when I die. My partner cannot even conduct the funeral, the last rite. He cannot even join perhaps. And then the property I have earned with hard work, I cannot pass it to my partner. What would happen when I die to him or her? So that's kind of, fear, very genuine one. It's here which is granted for the heterosexual couples here. So that's a huge disparity, discrimination by the state between the two types of citizens here. It's not only that, adoption is a problem and then not having a lot of rights and you are legally discriminated, treated as a second class or third class or fourth class. You're bound to, get this low self-esteem in your subconscious. So the progress is very difficult. It adds to the, mental complexity and then very easy to get depressed and anxious. So mental health problems, becomes a real concern for this community relatively to the others who are enjoying all the privileges and rights. So it's a lot of loss, and then it's not a small community. It's international studies suggest that LGBTI comprise of around 10% of the total population. So it's a huge, 10% of GDP perhaps, who would have been much more productive, have to struggle with their daily life, spending time on paperwork, fighting the discrimination. So how can one become productive and contribute to the whole social economy or national economy? So this country also losing to it. There was World Bank did a study saying having discriminatory laws and practices against LGBTI, it perhaps impacts 20% of your GDP. So even if that even exaggerated and we take it half, 10% is huge number for a country like Nepal. And if we allow, for example, protection and equality, the benefits multiplies. So people become healthier. The children who are growing a bit different than the social norm would not worry about much of their own sexual behavior or identities. They would do much better in their studies and professions. Then in, Nepal still has a good income source, national income source from the tourism. The tourism would go up if they welcome the LGBTI tourist, because in the West they have recognized this long ago, and then they call it pink dollar or something. And the two professionals working, and not much expenditure on children, things like this. So they have much more disposable income. And then, so it's very lucrative market for the West, the LGBTI tourism is, which Nepal have been missing for a long time. We have giant countries, both China and India. The rich class is growing there, and then is a significant, LGBTI population, which perhaps would come and spend their money in Nepal. So even in an economic point of view, it's very beneficial to have providing all the equality and non-discrimination for LGBTI communities.
So how do you explain these regressive moves from the state? Not only is the state willing to behave unconstitutionally, but it also turns a blind eye to the data the research committee produced, which, as you mentioned, shows the benefit of LGBTQ marriage, not just in preserving human rights, but as you just mentioned, but also in the economy itself. So why do you think is the state still not willing?
But state is, it's a machinery, it's a system combined by all the individuals, and individuals have their own, belief. And then there are a lot of persons in the bureaucracy, also in the politics, in the parliament, who who definitely believe that, homosexuality is some kind of less or not good for the healthy society, perhaps. But also there is a fear. They think if they allow same-sex marriage, all the men then will marry only men. And then the woman only marry woman who will reproduce, who will recreate, kind of thing. I've heard those, from few people who asked it, And so they should know that, not everyone is gay, not everyone is heterosexual either. And then countries have even Africa, South Africa have recognized same-sex marriages since 1996. And then the demography has not changed. The population hasn't declined at all. It's just the other people also have the same, their loving relation is recognized and honored by the state as do the heterosexual men and women. So the fear of, one is humanity, but also those privileged class who are in the top, to feed their ego, they need somebody less always, so that they can enjoy the fake kind of ego. So they want to have this disparity. So it's very odd and awkward for them to sit at the same table, same level to those who they have looked down upon for centuries. So it's going to take a long time for them to realize, but it's no choice now. You can't say look down upon somebody saying you're different. It's not ethical anymore. We all know it. So, caste-based discrimination, gender-based discrimination, geography-based or because of facial feature, the way you look, or the way you prefer your sexual expression or gender identity. You can't discriminate to another human because they are not causing any harm to you. They want to enjoy their life. So why are you imposing your value, your way of life on others? So it's not possible. It's not okay, any longer to still sit up on the top and then look others down and point fingers. So I was very disappointed when I hear the response from Law Ministry to the Women Ministry, because Women Ministry finally drafted this same-sex marriage bill, preliminary, and they sent it to the opinion from Law Ministry. The Law Ministry responded asking a question, and the fifth question was really deeply troubling. They said, what's the financial burden to the state if they allow same-sex marriage? So if they ask that kind of question to a citizen who is supposed to be there to facilitate the citizens' right and protect them, if they are concerned about economic burden to the state, you can understand the level of deep prejudice they're having in their subconscious. So there's no way out, except these bureaucrats, these politicians must learn now. We're not going to teach them every time. It's been 20 years, more than 20 years. So they can't say we don't understand, we don't know anymore. If you don't, then either leave or study. We're not your servant that we feel like we are obliged to go and treat their intellectual games or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you must understand all the human rights now. You must understand the country's demography, the people, the nature, etc., and then fulfill your duty that you are here to uphold the people's rights and protection. And if the peoples are more marginalized, pay more attention, invest more in the policy, in the programs, in the budget.
Hi there, this is Somit Nipane from Policy Entrepreneurs Inc. We hope you're enjoying Pods by PEI. As you know, creating this show takes a lot of time and resources, and we rely on the support of our community to keep things going. If you've been enjoying the show and would like to help us out, we'd really appreciate it if you could become a patron on Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows listeners like you to support creators like us with a small monthly donation. Your support will go a long way in helping us continue creating high-quality content for you. So if you're interested in supporting our show and becoming a part of our community, head on over to Patreon and become a patron today. You can find us at patreon.com/podsbypei. Every little bit helps, and we can't thank you enough for your support. Now let's get back to the episode.
So for the larger half of its history, patriarchy has really been deep-seated in Nepali society, which, as you said, is reproduced through heteronormative structures and values. Let us inch a little into the social and private aspects of this issue now. How is the Nepali public perception of the LGBTQ community today? Do we see progress, or is public perception and response still a barrier to break through, like gay marriage and their effective implementation?
Look, it's not just patriarchal society. It also, very hegemonical, based on certain religion and caste. So I do find it very amusing to see a lot of tolerance, especially among those, lower strata of the communities. Very supportive. Indigenous communities have less of a problem. I wouldn't call it no problem, but very less and very tolerant, very inclusive. And a lot of festivals you see have a lot of sexual diversity displayed, gender diversity displayed, whether it's Gai Jatra or Maruni dance, for example, or Ropain Jatra, or the Dakini dance, And there's some festivals which requires, third genders. There are a lot of deities, whether it's in, Vajrayana Buddhism or Mahayana or Hinduism or Tantric, practices. A lot of, gender neutral deities. We see them, or same-sex loving god or goddesses we see. So inherently, it's never been, homophobic or genderphobic culture. But slowly patriarchy comes here since last 2,500 years, slowly taking over. It has not completely wiped out. The matriarchal elements is still there. Ajimas are still revered in Kathmandu Valley. There's Maithan, or the mother goddesses are worshipped in whenever we see a big nice stone or a big tree or the two rivers, coming together. Or the two hills in the gorge, or top of the hill is always one or the other Maithan, whether it's Manakamana, Annapurna, or so many others. Chinnamasta is there, and so it's a very in a way matriarch country historically. But it has changed in the last 2,500 years. So we find it tolerant here, but also the philosophies are very, compassionate oriented. And then also the karma theory is here. So not much justice and punishment, but people come in a different form, or the sentient beings come in a different forms, and also take different forms. It's their own karma, guides their next destination. So in a way, they do see whoever, nature is, it it's his or her nature. Nothing to do with the sin or some kind of or somebody else, God or somebody. So that there is acceptance in that sense, diversity. We're all diverse. We are all different, but in a soul level or the ultimate level, it's also equal, because in infinite life, everyone comes and repeats different sorts of life, different nature of life. So people do know that they may have been in the past men, women, or third gender, or others, or even ancient sentient beings like ants or serpent or elephant, anything, or they would become in next life also. So in that sense, they do see a bit of apathy or sympathy or whatever. But then there is also this, unfortunately, patriarchy, but very hegemonical, hierarchical society. There's a ruling class, been last 500 years or so. And then, so 2,500 years, the patriarchy, the one men were, dominating this part of the land. Then slowly it's the two castes become Kshatriyas and Brahmins. Now, last, I think, 100 years so, it's more Brahmin than Kshatriyas. Now it's completely Brahmin. All the party, leaders are Brahmin. So they are, I do think they understand. They do believe in karma theories, etc. But it's very difficult for them to give up the privileges they have. That's why the resistance is here. I don't see a very ideological problem or the philosophical problem to accepting it. The difficulty for them is to give up their privileges. So that's why resistance to even accepting, including the women. Mm-hmm. Even, constitutional guarantees 33% of women representation is still not happening. So giving up your privilege, it's extremely difficult for them. But I again tell them that it's, you can't have it unjustly just for yourself forever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, learn to give up, learn to share, and then make this, society much healthier.
Yeah, I guess nobody with power would willingly give it up for anything.
Yeah.
But looking on the brighter side, are there any wins that you may have observed for the gender and sexual minorities in Nepal recently, since 2007?
So a lot of changes here, particularly I see a lot of young people coming out much more easily than we have, and perhaps with less opposition. The social media perhaps have helped it to get the information, knowledge, also finding a quick, comfort with the friendship and things like that, and peer groups, etc. So and then much more visible now with the organizations and more people coming. I see they have a new way of creating visibility. They do a flash mob every now and then. They also doing it June as a Pride Month, which I disagree, because they should do a Pride Month or Pride Day or Pride Week in other months where it's cooler, nicer. But because it's happening in America or Europe, they just copy it, which is not, conducive. And it's a American history. It's okay, we respect others' history, but you celebrate your own history or march for your own cause here, do not copy. And then it's a climate-wise, this is a disaster, June is best month in New York and London, but here it's like soaring 40 degrees Celsius. I saw the day people trying to do, in Nepalganj or Ithari or in Dharan, Biratnagar, everyone's sweating. Even for the allies to come and join is very difficult, And when there's kind of soaring heat, everyone stay cool inside. It's not a celebration, So blindly copying others is, and calling it pride, I don't agree with this. They should find better months. There's so many other festivals. The local days here, for example, the day Blue Diamond was formed should be another definitely Pride Day, or the Supreme Court gave us this fantastic verdict in 2007, April should be also a nice month. Should be celebrated as a Pride Day. There's a local festivals going on for centuries here, Gai Jatra, Rupai Jatra, Dakini dance whole week long. And then you have this whole month of Lakhe festival, is associated with queerness. It's men, but perform in a big jama, makeup, long hair, almost comes as a, middle gender or more feminine in that than more masculine. So there's so many elements that you can trace to your own roots and cultures and celebrate it. But it's happening, young people, and also blindly copying the concept of identity. They don't like the third gender, middle gender, or even local term like mithini. Should be, they're adopting gay, lesbian, also trans men or trans woman. And the idea of the healthy person, the psychological misguidance from the West is coming. So they think they're born in a wrong body and they have a gender dysphoria. It's a very Western concept. So it's a healthy person, but, because of the psychology they have, the philosophy they have, there's only true genders, man and woman. If you cannot become a man, you better become a woman by transitioning your whatever, physical alteration or something, and vice versa. So this very Western concept. Here we have, more than 5-6 genders, all is accepted in different traditions, whether it's Tibetan or the mountain region here, or Vajrayana here, or even Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism. 6 genders, and then so there are plenty of choices for you to find, comforting identity, but also expression in a healthy way. You don't have to be rigidly copying and then feeling that you're unhealthy and then going through this expensive surgery and taking hormones, which perhaps not necessary, and it's also long term. It's very unhealthy. So time to relook again. So I suggest this young generation not to blindly copy everything West does.
So I guess Western influence has made the youth more compassionate and empathetic towards the LGBTQ, but also left a very strong mark in the way that we celebrate the community.
Not just celebrate, but also you choosing your own core self in a bit of, trying to Westernize and then seeing Western model as a standard have been counterproductive. It's becoming a problem in the West also. The health system is now really struggling because when they recognize gender dysphoria as a disease, then the health system is supposed to support them, because in Europe, you have everything is covered and it's hugely expensive. And then, people, they give free hormones and then it doesn't work. They change it, add it, reduce it. And then after a couple of years, they want to come back. And then because it takes a toll on your mental health, so then whole detoxification, rehabilitation starts, and people go regret and they want to come back and, do the surgery or something, but which is not possible. So it's a complex, problem it has become even in the West. And then fully becoming a woman or become a man, whether it's possible or not possible, is still a debate. Whether, just doing your surgery, removing your male organs and putting a shape of a, vagina, would that make you a woman, full woman? Because you can't still have a period, you can't conceive baby, you can't still do breastfeeding. And then the other way around is more complicated, so it becomes a discriminatory practice within your own community. The female born who are masculine, who wish to transit and become a trans man, it's almost impossible. So that practice is discriminated within the same community, because someone is born male gets easier access and cheaper, somebody born female is discriminatory. And then so they would never become a man as a trans woman, a male-born transgender who would easily become a woman and produce a medical certificate and become a woman in a passport in gender. So it's a discrimination itself. And then now a bit of concern in the West, not just a bit of huge concern. This whole society is divided in the West. J.K. Rowling wrote an article 3 years ago, hugely contentious, and divided the whole West into two. Some are supporting, it's because of their feeling we support it. And the others said, no, we support them because who they are, not trying to become who they are not. And then the Olympics last year allowed for 6 years to compete the trans woman with a woman. But then women athletes who, spend a lot of time and resources, energy to make them fit and win the medal. And then they lose with the trans woman because physically the bones are much stronger they have. And so they're losing in running and swimming and other thing. And also some countries have been a bit more liberal, and they allow trans women without surgery still having a penis, but allowed to have a women passport. And now they had a problem because women's space is somehow spatial for some time. in certain setting like swimming or going to sauna or breastfeeding places or in a prison inmate. So there was a scandal happened when a few years ago in Canada, the trans woman was, put into the same prison cell with women. And then because it was a long-term prison sentence, the trans woman raped another inmate woman. So the scandal worked out. So you can't really, judge that way and then believe that because of your look and expression, you have become complete woman or complete man if you're not already born. So here in Eastern philosophies, it says, modify yourself, make up, modify, upgrade yourself, become best of yourself, but not somebody you are not.
So moving the conversation back to the topic of same-sex marriage, how can we build on the grassroots efforts for marriage equality made so far so that they can translate into the larger consolidation of rights and recognition of gender and sexual minorities at institutional levels?
The regular process to have same-sex marriage is the government, draft the bill, and then the cabinet approves it and then send it to the parliament. Then it goes to the parliament legislature committee, they consult, and then when it's ready, they put it to the parliament assembly for vote or amendment if they need it, and then finally pass it from there. But it's going very slow. So this is 2 writ petition again in the Supreme Court now being heard. One from the lesbian organization called Mithini, one from Blue Diamond Society recently filed. So they are asking to, speed up, ordering government to speed up the lawmaking process, but also demanding to have interim relief so that until the parliament passed the law, there's a separate, provision or a way out. And there's a possibility that the court may come with that decision asking, have a bill at least within 2 years. They can give, timeline to the government, but not to the parliament. But at the meantime, while the government and parliament pass the law, look, we have this, high courts where marriage is registered in each province, have a separate file desk register and keep it separately until the law is passed. So that allows the already living committed, same-sex relation to go and register their marriage. So that's the hope now.
Building upon that discourse, what about the Nepali people? What can be done to alleviate the stigma around gender and sexual minorities in Nepal?
The job is for the government. Should have been and always have been. Because if, a community that is discriminated unjustly, it's the government's job to protect them and educate those, perpetrators, for example, to have a knowledge and understanding about this community. So it's been long, but there's a, school curricula, class 7 and class 11 have included some into their textbook around sexual and gender minorities. But the problem is the teachers are not trained. There's no guidebook for them to help. And they do go through the internet, and not everyone is comfortable with English, but it's also culturally very different when you Google it. You come around gay, lesbian, and trans men and trans women only, but not so much about the local cultural thing here. But also confusion, and they still find this problem difficult to discuss, difficult to teach. So I have witnessed a lot of schools and colleges just avoiding this topic, and the teachers saying either giggling and then really treating this topic with mockery, or completely telling the students, look, this is the topic I'm not comfortable or I don't know, so you do your best by whatever resources you find it online or something. So it's very badly treated, this topic, into the schools and colleges. So the government should do it, invest more on it, train the teachers on this topic. Perhaps they should also come up with some guidebooks, some helping materials that is culturally more appropriate here, that has more of Eastern, ideas around it. But also, make the other, supportive environment, the information readily available. For example, the biology of sexuality and gender, the physiology, the psychology, the modern science, what it tells, what the cultural and mythological aspect of it, what are these festivals and things like that. But also make it more, discussion like, dinner table discussion like this, or friends having tea and can discuss it. So introduce it in a more sort of normal manner that it becomes an easy topic to discuss. So, and it's start with a very technical aspect from it. For example, the parents can teach their children, it's not just son growing up man, daughter growing up woman. There could be differences. What are these different, marking that we notice and how we deal with them? Yeah, ultimately, you shouldn't even deal with it because it's normal for everybody and everyone has their own different growing up and expressing themselves. So talking to young children is very important, not just giving type pictures of growing up man and woman. Oh, you would grow like this, you would grow like this. You may grow like this also, crisscross and some other forms. Then to the adults, teenagers, you talk about the sexuality, sexual expressions, sexual practices, the pleasure, not just the guilt. Not the guilt, the pleasure around, and also the other, important thing about sexual diseases, transmissions, unwanted pregnancy, all those things, you need to talk. It's not just, sexual gender minorities, sexuality and expression is a problematic, but whole reproduction and pleasure is a problem in this country because no one talks about it properly. And the parents avoid to ask. When a child asks, how did I, how do I come to this world? They say, no, it's God,
Right.
They shouldn't lie anymore about it. So make it more of a normal conversation. And then that's how you need to learn from this tantric, my matriarchal traditions where these topics were very normal. And then very, down to earth, the day-to-day kind of conversation. Nobody frowns or side away from this. Yeah.
I believe the court also recently recognized same-sex marriage as valid between a citizen and a non-citizen. So how does that work into the entire equation of marriage equality?
It doesn't do any changes directly, except the non-citizen who married to a citizen of Nepal in a same-sex relation recognized and got a spouse visa. So the decision makes that much direct impact. Indirectly, the decision has given very good suggestions, asked repeatedly again on 2 occasions after 2007 for government to speed up and, allows same-sex marriage relationship legally recognized. But also, that ensures that government cannot go back. Even though they did take time, they can take longer time, but the court makes them impossible not to recognize. Otherwise, we'll go back to the court again, and then they will perhaps issue more stricter order. So they know it. So that's why it's a couple of reasons. I think I said the privileged don't want to lose their share, which is not their share. It's the trick. They've been doing it for the last 200, 300 years. The second is LGBTI or the sexual gender minority community is not a priority to the government, which is very unfortunate. The political parties do not recognize this community as a vote bank. That's why they're not paying much attention either. So in that sense, I see, unless LGBTI come together and join the politics, they wouldn't know. And they see, it's a handful of, third gender or transgender people with either loud makeup and bright, fashion, standing on the streets doing sex work or something, or some organization protesting against the government, demanding rights, etc. So they don't see a big vote bank as 10%. If we make them realize, they would do it very fast. And then the other thing is bureaucracy is very lazy in this country. It's very difficult. Even they are not lazy. The whole system is so slow. And until you go and change it, It's just the same table for years and years and years. So I found, based on the committee's suggestion, the committee's report went to the government and went to the women ministry. They took years, and then they asked the law ministry to send their opinion, and the law ministry took 1 year just to send a FAPI's response. And then now it's been 3 years already in the response from the law ministry to the women ministry. It's sitting and eating dust into the cabinet. So you have to really do chase up, which is very unfortunate. Yeah.
So I guess if we want to see any change, we need to quite literally take things into our own hands. But as we strive to make the Nepali state and society more just and inclusive of its gender and sexual minority citizens, are there stories or lessons from around the globe that we can learn from?
Yeah, plenty. For example, when South Africa got independent, from the apartheid, Nelson Mandela became very visionary leader and became the first president. And when they wrote the constitution, they embraced everyone. So he was very persistent and very aware about no one left behind. So they had this fantastic constitutional guarantee, even up to marriage for the same-sex. So that's a huge, inspiration. So we looked up a lot to the South African. So one leader can really do a lot if he or she is visionary and inclusive and have sympathy and really see the future of the country on diversity and non-discrimination and just values, which was didn't happen here. They give a lot of promises here, but they ultimately turn out that they throw the king and they wanted to become another king. It's just like that. It happened. Then we see the UN, human rights after Second World War when they established was really, hopeful. And there's a General Assembly who have passed the Human Rights Convention, particularly the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and then also economic, social, and cultural rights. They were the foundation. You see a lot of clarity on intellectual level from them, but also Nepal have become party of them. They should have never had this, discriminatory laws on the ground of sexual orientation and gender, because they already signed and become the party and, protocol of the ICCPR. So when you become a country, become a party and also signs protocol, that convention, supersede the law. So now they should allow same-sex marriage because of that mechanism. But, Nepal don't work on rule of law. It's very ad hoc. And then if you have influence, you can do anything. Even for, to get a gender identity recognized in your passport other than different from your birth. As 11 people have got passport as women, while their birth certificate was male, because they have some access to power. Like Santosh Panta, who was into the army, and his son became daughter. So within a very short period of time, he had the citizenship ID and passport. Look now how many children with a single mother still is struggling to get citizenship ID here. But there was, gender change, everything changed, and then she was able to fly within very short time abroad. That's the thing happened. So this country is run by those privileged classes, and then for them, nothing is impossible. For others, everything is so tough.
Yeah. So from our conversation here today, I've gathered that it seems that there's nowhere to go for Nepal other than to legalize gay marriage. It's just a matter of when, right? So wrapping up, are there any final messages you may have for our listeners?
It's not just a matter of when, it's just a matter of how. The how makes the speed of the process. So I would ask the community members, especially those NGOs working now on LGBTI rights, to intervene on multiple fronts. One is litigation process. So there are cases going on into the court, participate it, invite and involve good lawyers, but also do some more media campaign to support this thing. But also hold your MPs accountable from your each electoral area, wherever you are from. Call them, send them messages, post them on social media. Yeah, you can ask them gently, humbly. You don't have to be, coercive or aggressive or abusive, but gently ask, what is my rights? Why I'm not allowed to marry, especially when the Constitution is already recognizing my equality and rights. But also the Supreme Court have given this order 15 years ago. Why you as a lawmaker not fulfilling your duty and protecting my law? Simply ask that question to your representative parliamentarians, elected bodies. But also, go and work with the bureaucracy. It's a lot of following up needed. Hold the bureaucracy accountable. Make them feel the pain that because of their delay, because I don't see any public oppositions from the parties and the ministers or the cabinets or the prime minister. Mm-hmm. So when you see them, they all say, yeah, we're supportive. So perhaps, who is causing the delay? Is it the minister? Is it the bureaucracy? So we need to clearly see, and a lot of people blame for the bureaucracy. Then, if it is true, then speed it up. If it's not, then tell us who is causing the delay. So I asked the community to intervene from multiple sectors. But also, when it's the country of marginalized people. If we are marginalized today, you would be tomorrow a marginalized one. So all other sectors, also support this cause, however you can. It's sexuality and gender minorities issues are very similar to the women issue. So the women lobby should embrace this as well, because they are much more stronger and also way bigger in numbers. So we are hoping really that the women lobby and feminist and women rights organization also taking up this issue, because it's gender, it's patriarchal created problem. But within LGBTI, there are a lot of women as well. The lesbians are also women. The third genders are very similar, and they're intersex people. So the women should also take it up. But on modern time, on 21st century, to be a man, meaning, not to control over anyone, but be a very gentleman and then respect equality, diversity, and support LGBT rights.
Thank you so much for that insightful conversation, Sunil, and thank you so much for sitting with us today. We wish you luck for you and all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Pods by PEI. I hope you enjoyed Tsedon's conversation with Sunil on the Roadbumps to marriage equality in Nepal. Today's episode was produced by Nirjan Rai with support from Ridesh Sapkota, Sonia Jimmy, and me, Khushi Han. The episode was edited by Ridesh Sapkota, and our theme music is courtesy of Rohit Shakir from Zindabad. If you liked today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast. Also, please do us a favor by sharing us on social media and leaving a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to the show. For PEI's video-related content, please search for Policy Entrepreneurs on YouTube. To catch the latest from us on Nepal's policy and politics, please follow us on Twitter at tweet2PEI. That's TWEET followed by the number 2 and PEI. And on Facebook at Policy Entrepreneurs Inc. You can also visit pei.center to learn more about us. Thanks once again from me, Khushi. We will see you soon in our next episode.